Stranger Things doesn't mess around when it comes to killing off characters, and some deaths hit way harder than others. From brutal monster attacks to heartbreaking sacrifices, these are the 10 most painful deaths that left us crying into our popcorn and questioning why we signed up for this emotional damage in the first place. 10. Barb Holland, the best friend who deserved better. Okay, can we talk about how Barb's death is basically the result of Nancy being the world's worst best friend? This poor girl just wanted a quiet night at home, probably watching movies and eating snacks like a normal person, but Nancy dragged her to Steve Harrington's party where she clearly didn't want to be. The whole thing screams peer pressure disaster from the start. So Barb's sitting there by the pool looking miserable, cutting her hand open on a beer can because, surprise, Nancy pushed her to do something she didn't want to do again. Then Nancy disappears with Steve, tells Barb she can leave if she wants. Thanks for nothing, Nancy, and abandons her outside alone. That single drop of blood from her cut hand attracts the Demogorgon, who drags her into the Upside Down faster than you can say terrible friend. Barb wakes up in this twisted nightmare version of the pool surrounded by webs and shadows, tries desperately to escape, but the monster shows up again and tears her apart brutally. Later, Nancy finds her decomposing body in one of the most disturbing images in the entire show. The worst part, Barb died scared, alone, and confused, all because her best friend prioritized a guy over her safety. Justice for Barb, honestly, because that death was preventable on like 17 different levels, and she deserves so much better than becoming monster food at a party she never wanted to attend. 9. Bob Newby, the unlikely hero. Bob Newby's death is one of those scenes that absolutely destroys you emotionally, and honestly, it's not fair because he was genuinely one of the sweetest characters in the entire show. Joyce's laid-back, optimistic boyfriend who just wanted to help and make everyone smile. Classic, unlikely hero material who didn't deserve what happened to him at all. When Bob, Joyce, Will, and the others get trapped in Hawkins' lab surrounded by upside-down creatures, the power goes out and they desperately need someone who understands computer systems. Bob, being the nerdy legend he is, volunteers immediately because that's just who he is. Helpful to a fault. He actually succeeds, running through the halls sweating but still wearing that hopeful smile, genuinely believing everything's gonna work out fine. For a brief moment, you think he's made it. He's so close to the exit, so close to safety, and then the Demodogs appear out of nowhere and tear him to shreds while Joyce watches helplessly, unable to do a single thing to save him. Bob dies trying to save everyone, and his loss hits different because he wasn't some trained soldier or supernatural kid. He was just a good guy who stepped up when it mattered. His courage and genuine love for Joyce and the kids turned him into a real hero, and watching him go down like that was absolutely devastating. One of the saddest moments in the series, hands down, because we all knew Bob deserved to make it out alive. 8. Billy Hargrove, the villain who found redemption. Throughout season 3, Billy is basically the Mind Flayer's main servant, acting cruel and ruthless and generally being the worst version of himself possible. But here's the thing, the monster inside Billy isn't really him, it's the result of his possession by the creature from the Upside Down, and deep down there's still a piece of the lost, broken boy hiding behind that cold, violent exterior. In the final episode at Starcourt Mall, Eleven faces the monster and does something incredible. She uses her powers to dive into Billy's mind and makes him remember a simple but powerful memory of a sunny day at the beach with his mom before everything went wrong in his life. That tiny spark of humanity breaks the Mind Flayer's control completely, and Billy wakes up for real this time. When the monster moves to attack Eleven, Billy steps in front of her, facing the Mind Flayer alone in an act of pure sacrifice. He's struck over and over by its tentacles, blood everywhere, and dies right in front of his sister Max in one of the most emotional scenes in the entire show. You can see the humanity flood back into his eyes, see him realize he's finally doing something good after all the terrible things he's done. His death is more than just a sacrifice. It's the end of a redemption arc that finally shows the real Billy behind the villain mask, the kid who got lost somewhere along the way and finally found his way back just in time to save someone else. Absolutely heartbreaking. 7. Alexei, the lovable Russian scientist. One of the most beloved characters from season 3 was Alexei, the Russian scientist who captured everyone's hearts with his innocent, childlike personality and genuine excitement about experiencing American culture for the first time. This guy just wanted to enjoy Slurpees and carnival games, and honestly, he deserved to live his best life after helping the gang. His death was shocking and brutally unfair. While enjoying the 4th of July festival in Hawkins, completely happy and carefree, finally experiencing the freedom and fun he'd been missing his whole life, Alexei gets shot down by Grigori, the Russian assassin sent to eliminate him. One second he's smiling and having the time of his life, the next he's dying in an alley while Murray desperately tries to get help that won't arrive in time. What makes Alexei's death even worse is how meaningless and sudden it feels. He wasn't fighting monsters or sacrificing himself for the greater good, he was just trying to enjoy a festival. The impact was devastating, not only for the characters, but especially for fans who had grown to love his wholesome energy in just a few episodes. He dies alone and scared, and it's one of those deaths that feels genuinely unjust because Alexei had finally escaped his old life and was just starting to experience actual happiness. The show really knew how to make us care about someone quickly and then rip them away without warning, and Alexei's death proved they weren't playing around with emotional damage anymore. 6. Eddie Munson, the metal hero who didn't run. In just one season, Eddie Munson became one of the most beloved characters in Stranger Things, which made his death one of the most emotional and unforgettable scenes in the entire show. This charismatic metalhead went from being falsely accused of murder to proving he was a legitimate hero who would do anything to protect his friends. In the Upside Down, Eddie climbs to the top of his trailer and performs an absolutely epic solo of Metallica's Master of Puppets to distract Vecna's demo bats. And honestly, the scene is legendary. As the demonic bats close in, Eddie and Dustin manage to escape through the portal, but then Eddie makes a decision that changes everything. He cuts the rope and stays behind in the Upside Down to buy more time for his friends to face Vecna. Armed with only courage, a makeshift shield, and a spear, Eddie grabs a bike and lures the demo bats away from the portal, and then he makes the ultimate choice. This time, he won't run like he's always done before. He fights bravely for as long as he can, but he's hopelessly outnumbered, and the inevitable happens. The attack is brutal, bats tearing into him from every direction until he's severely wounded and collapsing. When Dustin returns, he finds Eddie covered in blood, and in his final moments, Eddie smiles and says he finally didn't run, showing his true growth as a character who overcame his greatest fear. Later, Dustin tells Eddie's uncle about his sacrifice, making sure the world knows that the Hawkins fugitive died a true hero who saved lives when it mattered most. 5. Chrissy Cunningham, Vecna's first victim. Chrissy Cunningham's death is the first major shock of season 4, and the moment the show proves it's gotten significantly darker than previous seasons. The perfect cheerleader with the picture-perfect life hides a completely broken side, tormented by nightmares and haunting visions tied to her past trauma and abusive home life that nobody knew about. Trying to escape her pain and the voices in her head, she meets with Eddie Munson, the wild, charismatic metalhead of Hawkins, thinking some drugs might help quiet her mind. But what seems like a casual meeting turns into an absolute living nightmare when Chrissy starts hearing voices, seeing disturbing visions of her mother yelling at her, and gets pulled into Vecna's realm without any warning or chance to fight back. Meanwhile, in the real world, Eddie watches in complete horror as Chrissy levitates in the middle of the room, unable to do anything to help her or understand what's happening. What follows is genuinely brutal. Her bones twist at impossible angles, her eyes disappear into hollow sockets, and her body collapses lifelessly to the floor like a broken doll. Eddie flees in shock and terror, becoming the prime suspect in her murder when he's completely innocent. Chrissy's death not only introduces Vecna as the season's terrifying villain, it sets the grim, mature tone for everything that follows and proves that nobody is safe anymore, not even characters who seem protected by their popularity or perfect image. Her death hits hard because she was just trying to escape pain and found something infinitely worse. 4. Fred Benson, Guilt's Deadly Grip. Fred Benson, Nancy Wheeler's classmate who's investigating Chrissy's death with her, starts being tormented by disturbing visions that force him to relive his worst memory on repeat, the car accident he caused in the past that he never managed to move on from or forgive himself for. The tragedy haunting Fred happened the year before in 1985 when he was driving and lost control of the car, causing a fatal crash that killed a classmate. While Fred escaped with just a scar on his face as a permanent reminder, the other boy died horrifically, burnt alive in the wreckage. Ever since that moment, Fred carried the unbearable weight of survivor's guilt, reliving the moment of impact in his mind over and over, torturing himself with what-ifs and self-blame. Vecna, sensing that vulnerability and emotional pain like a predator smelling blood, uses Fred's trauma as a weapon against him. Manipulated by the intensifying visions, Fred is lured back to the exact same stretch of road where the accident happened, forced to confront his worst nightmare made real. As the hallucinations reach their peak, Vecna breaks into his mind completely. Fred levitates, his bones snap one by one, and he dies in the same brutal way Chrissy did. His death reinforces Vecna's cruel pattern of hunting down people who are emotionally broken and vulnerable, using their trauma and guilt to trap them. Fred's death is painful not just physically, but because he died believing he deserved it, never forgiving himself for a tragic accident that wasn't entirely his fault. 3. Dr. Martin Brenner, Papa's final manipulation. Dr. Martin Brenner's end in Season 4 is dark and brings a twisted closure to one of the show's most manipulative relationships. After trying to restore Eleven's powers at the secret Nevada facility, the military storms the base, forcing Brenner and Eleven to flee into the desert together like fugitives. Chased by a military helicopter, Brenner is hit by sniper fire and collapses, bleeding heavily. Even wounded and dying, he tries desperately to convince Eleven to trust him one final time, insisting he always loved her like a daughter and that everything he did was for her own good. But Eleven has finally grown beyond his manipulation. She breaks free emotionally, uses her powers to take down the helicopter threatening them, and then makes a choice that defines her growth as a character. She leaves Brenner alone, bleeding out in the middle of the desert, and walks away with her friends without looking back. Her final words, "Goodbye, Papa," carry so much weight because they represent her finally closing that painful chapter of abuse and control that's haunted her since Season 1. Brenner's death marks the end of Papa, the manipulative figure who controlled and hurt Eleven for years, always justifying his cruelty as love. After years of psychological abuse disguised as care, Eleven is finally free to define herself on her own terms. What makes this death painful isn't necessarily sympathy for Brenner, it's the weight of everything that relationship represented and watching Eleven walk away from the man who shaped so much of her trauma. His death alone in the desert is almost poetic justice for all the suffering he caused. 2. Max Mayfield, the death that wasn't but kinda was. Okay, I know Max isn't technically dead permanently, but we absolutely have to talk about that scene because it's one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the entire series and had everyone convinced she was gone for good. Max Mayfield's fate at the end of Season 4 is brutal beyond words. Determined to help her friends defeat Vecna, Max volunteers to be the bait, facing the same monster who had already tormented her before and nearly killed her. While she's inside the Creel mansion, Vecna invades her mind and begins an absolutely merciless attack. Max tries to fight back with everything she has, but Vecna is too powerful. Her bones shatter one by one, she loses her vision completely, and her heart literally stops beating, triggering a new rift in Hawkins that connects the real world to the Upside Down. Lucas is screaming her name, holding her broken body, and watching this for the first time was so heartbreaking that I was absolutely certain Max had died, and she actually does die. Her heart stops, she's gone, but not for long. Using every ounce of her remaining power, Eleven brings Max back to life from miles away, but the price is devastatingly high. Max falls into a coma with no sign of her consciousness anywhere, her mind seemingly trapped somewhere unreachable. Everyone at the hospital assumes she's essentially gone, even though her body is technically alive, raising the haunting question, is part of Max still trapped with Vecna in some nightmare realm? Will she ever actually wake up and be herself again? The ambiguity makes it somehow worse than a clean death because we're left wondering if the Max we knew is truly gone forever or if there's hope. Absolutely devastating either way. 1. Virginia Creel, the mother who created a monster. Virginia, Creel never imagined her own son, Henry, would be the one responsible for her horrifying death, but that's exactly what happened in one of the show's darkest backstory reveals. Even as a child, Henry showed dangerous psychokinetic powers and a deep, disturbing hatred toward his family, especially his mother, who began suspecting his strange behavior and planned to send him to doctors for testing and evaluation. Using his abilities, young Henry attacked his mother in a way that would become Vecna's signature kill pattern decades later. Virginia levitates into the air as her bones snap grotesquely one by one, the exact same method Vecna uses on his victims in the present day. After brutally killing his mother, Henry murders his sister too, then falls into a coma, leaving his father Victor Creel to be wrongly accused and imprisoned for murders he didn't commit. This family tragedy is the foundation for everything. It's how Henry becomes #1 at Hawkins' lab, how he eventually transforms into Vecna, and why his methods are so specifically cruel and personal. Virginia's death is painful not just because of how she died, but because she was killed by her own child who she loved and tried to help, never understanding the monster living inside her son. The tragedy shows that the evil Vecna became was rooted deep in his childhood, making this death the origin point for basically all the horror that follows in the series. Without Virginia Creel's murder, none of the Upside Down nightmare would exist in the same way, making her death arguably the most significant and painful in terms of its lasting impact on the entire story. So there you have it, the 10 most painful deaths in Stranger Things, from innocent best friends to reluctant heroes who deserved better. Which death hit you the hardest and had you ugly crying? Just drop your most devastating moment in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe, because season 5 drops soon and you know there's gonna be even more emotional damage coming our way.